Scaries. Scary Monsters. Book 3. Them Giant Spiders. By author Ichabod Maximus Scary. Prologue. Todd Grosscup gripped the steering wheel tighter as his big rig rumbled through the winding mountain pass. Rain hammered relentlessly on the windshield, creating blurry streaks that his windshield wipers struggled to clear. Lightning flickered frequently, illuminating the dense, shadowy forest surrounding the long, twisting road. Each flash of lightning made Todd's knuckles whiten just a bit more, and his eyes strained in the darkness, desperately trying to focus on the slick, treacherous pavement ahead. Todd glanced nervously at the passenger seat, where a plastic container held the supper his girlfriend, Becca, had lovingly packed for him. Beside the steak and the buttery salt potatoes Becca had so lovingly made lay a thick, homemade brownie wrapped tightly in clingy plastic wrap. Todd's stomach growled loudly, competing with the low rumble of thunder outside. Todd remembered Becca wagging her finger at him earlier that evening, her eyes sparkling playfully as she warned, "Don't you dare eat the brownie first, Todd. You need to eat some real food. Promise me?" "Promise," Todd had told her, grinning sheepishly, knowing full well that her brownies were his weakness. But now, miles away from home and completely alone in the truck, Todd felt his resolve weakening. He smirked mischievously to himself, rationalizing quietly, "What Becca don't know won't hurt her," as his hand slowly reached for the brownie. The tempting dessert felt heavy and deliciously dense through the plastic, and Todd's mouth watered in eager anticipation. With one eye still on the winding, slick mountain road, Todd fumbled awkwardly with the stubborn plastic wrap. "Come on," he grumbled impatiently, tugging harder as frustration built. Todd took his eyes off the road just for a split second, desperately wrestling the clingy wrapping, trying to unwrap the delicious dessert without losing control of the massive truck he was driving. A sudden flash of movement ahead jerked his attention sharply back to the road. Directly in the glare of his headlights, a large deer stood frozen, its eyes wide with fright and confusion. "Whoa!" Todd shouted, panic surging through him as adrenaline pumped fiercely in his veins. Without thinking, Todd jerked the steering wheel sharply to the left, just barely missing the startled animal by mere inches. The truck shuddered violently beneath him, and Todd's hands slipped momentarily off the wheel. The brownie flew from his grip, tumbling out of sight onto the grimy cab floor. "Crap! My brownie!" Todd cried out, a pang of genuine distress mixing with his panic. Keeping one trembling hand tightly on the wheel, he leaned over frantically, eyes scanning desperately for the fallen brownie. His attention was torn between the slick road ahead and the sweet treat lost somewhere beneath him. Just then, the truck's massive tires slammed hard into a deep pothole, hidden by the darkness and flooded roadway. The entire rig lurched sickeningly to one side. Todd's breath caught sharply as he fought desperately for control. Tires squealed, and with a sickening jolt, the big rig swerved wildly out of control, careening toward the edge of the steep embankment lining the road. Metal screeched loudly, drowning out Todd's frightened shout as the truck crashed violently into the rusted guardrail. Sparks erupted, showering the dark road in a fiery display. For a terrifying moment, the flatbed trailer tilted dangerously, hanging precariously on the edge of the steep hillside. Todd held his breath, every muscle in his body frozen rigidly, praying the trailer wouldn't plunge into the abyss below. Finally, after an agonizing few seconds, everything seemed to settle in the eerie stillness. The engine sputtered once, coughed weakly, and then died completely, plunging the road into silence, broken only by the steady drumming of rain on metal. Slowly, shakily, Todd unclenched his fists from the steering wheel, his heart hammering painfully in his chest. "That was way too close," Todd whispered weakly, his voice barely audible, even to himself. Gathering his nerve, Todd carefully climbed down from the cab, legs trembling unsteadily beneath him. Cold rain drenched him instantly, soaking through his clothes as he circled cautiously around the truck, flashlight in hand, inspecting the damage. Miraculously, the guardrail had held firm, barely preventing the massive trailer from plunging down the steep hillside into darkness. Todd shone his flashlight carefully on the cargo, a heavy metal crate secured tightly with chains, filled with dozens of industrial-strength canisters, each clearly marked in bold yellow lettering: danger, toxic waste. Todd exhaled slowly, relieved. Nothing seemed damaged, and the chains were still intact. Todd let out a nervous laugh, wiping rainwater from his face. He had gotten lucky, and he knew it. Todd slowly climbed back into the truck's cab, shivering from the rain and anxiety, reaching for his radio to call in the accident to his boss. His fingers hovered above the handset, about to grab it, when his gaze suddenly fell on the brownie lying on the muddy, cluttered floor of the truck. Todd hesitated for a brief moment, then sighed and picked it up carefully, brushing away as much dirt as possible. Shrugging, he reasoned aloud, it'll be fine. Calling the boss can wait. Todd bit into the brownie, closing his eyes briefly to savor the rich, chocolatey sweetness, completely oblivious to the fact that far below, a single canister from his precious load had been dislodged during the accident. The heavy metal container tumbled free, crashing noisily down the steep hillside, bouncing violently through dense bushes and tangled vines, until it finally slammed hard into a jagged, moss-covered rock and came to rest. With a sharp, metallic crack, the canister split open slightly, leaking a thick, glowing green ooze onto the forest floor. Deep beneath the wet brush, a tiny spider scuttled nervously across her meticulously constructed web, vigilantly guarding her precious egg sac from the storm. The sudden, intrusive arrival of the canister startled her, but before she could react, the thick, glowing ooze dripped onto her tiny body, sizzling angrily as it touched her fragile exoskeleton. The spider writhed in sudden agony, the toxic substance burning painfully through her small frame. She struggled weakly, desperately, her tiny limbs trembling violently. But then something strange began to happen. The spider's body started to grow, her delicate limbs thickening, her fangs elongating sharply, and her 8 tiny eyes now glowing faintly with a sinister green light. At the same time, more of the glowing sludge dripped steadily onto the egg sac, quickly seeping through the delicate silk casing. Almost immediately, the egg sac began pulsating ominously, each beat stronger and more frantic than the last. Something inside was waking, growing stronger, fueled by the sinister toxin leaking into its very core. As the storm continued to rage overhead, the mutated spider, now monstrous and terrifying, crawled silently away into the darkness, her enormous new form disappearing among the shadows. Behind her, within the pulsating egg sac, her offspring stirred aggressively, rapidly transforming into terrifying creatures the world had never before imagined. Dark, menacing creatures, fueled by toxic power and a terrifying hunger.